fix their ECO2
I'm gonna hold the bicarb conversation until after we take a break, and I'm gonna have Corey come talk to you about bicarb, because I'm only in a meeting, I can't actually do bicarb. So I'm not as, I feel like I'm not educated enough to make sure you guys know, which is why I totally forgot you can get bicarb. Is that good? So let's take a break. Corey will come back and he'll talk to you about bicarb.
Make sure that you are doing your workout log. So get started on that if you haven't. I've been posting all the workouts, so if you haven't seen that, everything that you've been doing, I've been posting. And I already posted the third one for this week that you have to do on your own at some point in time. So it's up and ready to go. Hopefully by now, most of you are noticing differences in body position when you're working out, right? When you're doing it correctly versus when you're not. If you find that you're doing an exercise and it doesn't seem to be hard, most commonly you're not doing it correctly, right? So a lot of the exercises that we're doing right now are ones that will end up being warm-up exercises for stuff that we're doing down the road. And you should be, when you do these basic ones, even without weight, you should be breaking a sweat and you should be hurting, especially your glute. Just wait until we do the box walks a little bit differently. So keep that in mind. You're gonna have butts of steel.
Box walks or suitcase walk?
Box walks.
Have we done box walks?
We did today.
I don't know.
You might have been a little late, so it's one of the first things we did. So yeah.
Some bands around the legs.
No, okay,
Crab walk.
so Quinn does personal training, and his gym is set up that way, and there's a Olympic lifting team that goes there, so it's not just a gym that's open all the time. And the one downstairs also.
Oh, okay.
Is not open just all the time. So let me explain. You can do most of the stuff that we'll have on that third thing is something you can do at home. But that being said, I would encourage you to not do it at home. Not because I don't want you to do things at home, but because you're more accountable when you're not doing it at home. When you have to physically go somewhere and meet someone, you tend to be more accountable to it. So I would encourage you to have a couple of people in here that you like to work out with, that you can meet, because you're going to be accountable to getting it done. So Quinn will be at his facility, and the differences in the two places, like the stuff we're doing right now works great here. When we start doing things where we need to add weight or have much larger kettlebells or something like that, this place just doesn't have the equipment for that, so that's when we'll start splitting time and going over to that other gym. Quinn is available at that other gym every Friday at noon, from noon to 1:30. So if you're wanting that third workout to be with him on Friday, go there. That's perfectly fine.
If we, for some reason, have to miss a class here, can we make it up there?
That would be fine too. Yep, that's perfectly fine. You can also, I'm open to times that you want to do something with me. That's perfectly fine. I can tell you, not that any of you will enjoy this at all, but I can tell you that every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm at that gym at 5:45 in the morning. I go from 5:45 to 7:15 so that I can get home in time to get my kids to school, so I can get here for you guys. So if you're wanting to do that, you're welcome to come there and work out with me. I will preface that by saying I'm working out at that time as well, so I have no problems like working, giving advice, helping you with stuff. Just realize that I'm also going to be lifting at that time too. So that's a perfectly viable time if you're an early. I am not a morning person, but I have found that getting my workout done in the morning, sleep. Yeah, that's beside the point. I'm just saying if I can do it in the morning, it's tend to work out well for me. So 5:45 to 7:15, I will be at that gym on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I do something on Saturday and Sunday as well, but sometimes it's hit and miss. If there's a few of you that want to be doing something on the weekends, then I can make my time consistent. I can make that happen. And I'm fine as long as there's not a class going on downstairs, opening up this space for you as well at a given time. So if there's a few of you that say, hey, we'd like to get together at this time, whatever day that is, then I can set it up so that you can be down there, as long as you clean up after yourself.
Is it possible to get a schedule posted on the door downstairs so people can see, schedule a
Yeah, I can
time
look,
that's
I can look
not-
and see if we've got something consistent, so. Yeah.
Is there gonna be a nutrition component to PT at some point?
So we added some documents for you on nutrition.
I saw the resources online, but are you gonna go?
Yeah, we haven't intended to kind of throw a diet change at you at the same time, at least not a mandatory one, but I have to tell you that you can't do everything on exercise. Exercise can do a whole lot, but you have to have diet too. Diet's kind of a bad word, right? You don't go on diets. Whatever you're eating right now is your diet. Whatever that is. Like if you eat potato chips every day, then your diet is potato chips. Fantastic. But if you want to see real changes in your body, diet has to be a part of the exercise stuff. So yeah, I'll talk, but it'll be more informal talking to that. As a general rule, all of you need to eat more vegetables. I'm just saying, as a general rule, all of you need to eat more vegetables. And if you eat a lot of vegetables, all of you need to eat more vegetables. I'm just saying, as a general rule, I can pretty much tell you, and probably a wider range of vegetables. Like you can't eat carrots all the time and expect to have a vegetable growth. You have to have green leafy vegetables, and it needs to be a wide range. And if you hate vegetables, then what I would tell you is you got to eat vegetables. I don't know what else to tell you. That doesn't mean you only eat vegetables. I'm just saying you got it.
How often are we turning in the workout logs?
You're not turning it in at all. I will at times ask to see it, but I won't ever ask you to physically turn it in. In the end, it's for you. If you end up that I see that you're not doing it, then that'll become a problem, right? But I'll ask to see it and give advice, and you should have a little section on there that's just notes, like what are the challenges you're having? Like I've talked to a whole lot of you down there, and we've been working on little things that you have to work on. You should be noting what those are, and then seeing when those are fixed for you. Like some of you are hunched over all the time, right? And so whatever the case is, whatever advice you're getting, make little notes on what it is that are your challenges, and then work on those. Make sense? If you are wanting to work out more than the 3 exercises that are there, then feel free to come in at a time that I'm already working out or something like that, and I will create something for you on the spot that complements what we're already doing, so that you're not getting overworked. I work out 7 days a week, but that's not every one of my workouts is lifting heavy or something like that. Some of them it's conditioning, and some of it's just making sure I'm keeping my motion and movement and staying consistent. And I'm happy to share my blood work with you. If you want to see the changes in my blood work over the last, say, 6 years, I'm happy to show you what's happened to my blood over the course of exercise and diet as much as I can.
And in regards to just additional times besides the 2 days we have here, Tuesday, Thursday, if we go to his gym at any other times, are there any additional costs or
No.
fees associated
Nope.
with it? We just show up?
Whatever time he's available and whatever time he has open, where other people, we need to be careful that 24 of you don't come at a time when a team's going, but, so he's there noon to 1:30 every Friday. And then there's other times as well that he can make known, and I can also meet you there or here as well. So there's other times, and I can just open the rooms up for you too. I don't have to be working on you. But no, it's all built into everything you're doing already. Make sense? So the one that you should be doing between now, tomorrow through Monday is already posted. It's all stuff that you're familiar with. It's all stuff that you can figure out and do at home, so it's not something that should stress you on equipment or anything like that. It's continuing to build that form until we get to the point where we're really starting to add some weight. Cool? Questions? In general, tuck your hip, suck your belly in, squeeze the grape, and get your shoulders set, which is what most people aren't very good at, and why we see so many injuries in the real world. Cool. Questions? What's today?
Thursday.
Thursday. So I'll be at the gym at 5:45 tomorrow morning if you're wanting to do your workout at the same time I'm doing mine. I will tell you that about, I don't know, 2 to 3 times per week, my 12-year-old son gets up and goes with me so he can do it.
And
He can do his workout.
Paramedic program?
mad respect.
He's in my paramedic program.
It's been taken 20 years, but.
Gosh.
Who did diffusion? Come on up. And whatever capacity you want. I don't care how you do it. Get yourself set up with whatever it is that you want, however you want to do it.
You need your seat closer. Like that.
Are we like hooking the computer up to that? Or?
I'm sure if you ask him, he can show you how.
All right. So we're going to Diffusion. Diffusion incorporates two major things. One of them is solutes. Everybody know what a solute is? It's the particles, the things that you're dissolving. And solutions, which is usually a liquid medium that you are dissolving them in. And then you have concentrations of the solutes and the solvents. And the rule of thumb is basically you want to go high to low, right? You got a lot over here and a little bit over here. It's always wants to find equilibrium. So if you have a really high solute concentrate and a very low one over here, those particles are going to try to equal out. And the best way of showing that is by making myself a drink. So, what we have here is plain water, right? There's going to be plain water inside. Is it the tea rag? It is plain old water. Was. There's plain water got inside the tea bag. There's plain water outside. There's what? Particles in the water? No, but there's particles in the tea bag, right? Tea bag picks those up, and now it's going to move as many of those particles that can fit through that filter over. So you can think of it kind of like blood too, where the larger particles, say called the tea leaves, the proteins, can't get through that filter, which would be your cellular membrane. They don't go anywhere, but the smaller particles, things that should be moving back and forth between, can get through that filter. So I think that brings it to our passage.
Almost done.
No, he's like went all the way from back there and is going all the way to the loading dock. Yeah.
All right, so broadly speaking, when we're talking about kinds of diffusion, we're talking about solutes passing through a membrane. And so we have two big broad categories of diffusion. So you'll have passive diffusion and active diffusion. So passive diffusion requires no energy whatsoever. And in passive diffusion, molecules follow their gradient, right? So if there's a bunch of molecules on one side of a membrane, and then not very many on the other side, that means that the gradient is going this way. They like to spread out, so they'll diffuse through that membrane without the assistance of any sort of energy. So physiologically speaking, for us, big ones in our body, the first one would be like O2. So these kind of molecules that I'm talking about here, they're ones that are electrically neutral and relatively small. So if O2 is one of the things that passively diffuses in our body into our bloodstream, what are some other ones that you guys can think of? Just scream them at me. Yeah, water. Yeah?
CO2.
Yeah, I like the enthusiasm as well. And then there's some bonus ones here as well, because I looked them up yesterday on my phone. Urea, yeah. And then, this is my favorite, ethanol. So those all can move through membranes inside our body without any help of energy assisting it. So, yeah, talk about gradients. It's a good way to stop, just say yeah.
Yeah.
That was the calendar you were saying about.
Yes, love to. So, a chemical gradient is just talking about the concentration of one thing between a membrane. So the chemical gradient here, if we have one chemical out here and another here, if there's a smaller concentration of it beyond the membrane, then the chemical gradient is going down. So that's why, talking about these ones that are electrically neutral, all we're worried about is that chemical gradient. If we're talking about something like an ion, which we're going to talk about a lot when we talk about active transport, then if there's a charge, then that creates an electrical gradient as well. So one way that you can think of it is like, this is a bad example because there's a lot up here. So we're going to put a bunch more in here and pretend that this straight line is the cell membrane. So we have potassium, we have a lot of potassium inside the cell. And then outside in the intracellular space, we don't have as much potassium, right? So this potassium, inside the cell, it's got a negative charge. Let's make sure that I do this correctly. And outside, it's got a little bit more of a positive charge, right? Everyone's with me on that. So the potassium, it wants to move from a positive charge, because potassium's positive, into an area that has a negative charge. Because think about it like opposites attracting. Everything is trying to balance itself out in between that membrane. So the electrical gradient is trying to go into a cell, right? So potassium wants to move into a cell, whereas the chemical gradient is trying to force potassium out of the cell because there's so much inside and not as much outside.
And I'll talk about facilitated diffusion. And so that means like if we have one of our pathways here where we kind of have like a door into the cell because we have our phospholipid layer, right? That doesn't let things through, but we have these channels where we can get whatever it is we want in the cell, if it's ions, if it's glucose, if it's whatever. There's some that are able to just passively pass through, and there's some that are, for a lack of a better word, locked, where we can't get into it. So it needs something to help bring it through, like insulin and glucose. So for insulin to get, or for glucose to get into the cell, it's going to need to find its buddy insulin, so that insulin can go and unlock the door for us. But it can't just move into the cell, it's going to need its protein carrier so that its other buddy that it is always hanging out with is going to walk through the door with that person, because they know the people inside. But insulin has to unlock our door so it can get through, and that's facilitated.
I'm gonna talk about active diffusion, which is special because it uses energy to go across the membrane, and it's different from passive transport because it's moving against its gradient, its concentration gradient. So instead of going from levels of high to low, it can go from low to high. The main enzyme that takes part in this is ATPase, which we all know as the sodium potassium pump, which I drew up here too, which is pumping 3 sodiums out and 2 in, 2 potassiums in. And the way I remember this is if you have a party and you text your friends, 3 said nah and 2 said okay, which it was a really lame party, but the membrane, the basement membrane, the potential was maintained because of that. So just to go a little bit more in depth about that, because this is like the main way that we use active transport in the body. The channels open on this side to allow the 3 sodiums in, but once it goes in order to go all the way, a phosphorylation has to happen, and that uses ATP to get the sodium outside of the cell. And then when this is open to the potassiums, it just goes right through. So the ATPase is really necessary for this portion. That's an example of active distribution.
Give us a question.
Questions?
Yes.
ATP is required for the sodium, but not for the potassium?
Yes. Because it changes the shape of the channel, and then once the potassium goes in, it changes back, the phosphorylation is reversed. But the ATP is only really necessary for that portion, if the beginning part.
Other questions for him?
Just a comment, the way I learned the 3 NAs and the 2 Ks. 3, there's 3 symbols in Na plus. 2, there's 2 symbols in K plus.
Yeah, great.
Look at you being visual.
That's.
There's slug
yeah,
on
I have.
Pardon?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
the slug was our other example, and we didn't want to kill a slug in front of you, so we decided T, because T had our membrane and our solute.
Hamsters.
We were
And it's also always really important to remember that one thing of waterfall is salt. That's one of our golden rules, right? Salt follows water, water follows salt, both ways.
Get out of here. Who did the neuron? Get out there.
You want to grab it, Amanda? I got it. Sorry.
Nice cup of tea.
Yeah, it's sort of.
Just come
Anything you put your mind to.
ever since someone told me it, I never forgot. That's probably the only thing.
Use the same library. Why this one's
On the other side.
We have tape? Oh, yes. Thank God, I was like, that works. Oh, God.
Oh, so
Jesus.
No.
What is with the laser pointer?
What?
I was like, good, I channeling so fast.
I know.
Yeah, I looked to Swick and channeling because I thought they had it.
Seriously?
Everyone can see this. Yes.
I'm one of you now.
I still know you're gonna make fun of us. Can everyone see this stuff? We're good? It's big enough for people to see?
No,
Yeah?
I can't see the writing, but let's see, there's words, there's stuff on it.
No? Okay, we're good. So we have neurons, so your basic neuron here. And the signal will travel from the dendrite through the axon to the axon terminal. Does anyone know what myelin does to help with?
Insulates it.
Yeah, so it helps speed up the transport of the signal. And when we get through to the axon terminal, yes, I know this is upside down. I was told that yesterday by Corey, but roll with me on that. It will, the calcium channels on the end of the axon terminal, the action potential for it is technically a trigger, or the action potential that runs through the neuron is a trigger for it, but it's not what was the word, directly causes?
Yeah, so you have a whole action potential that's gonna travel along this axon, okay? So when you get your signal here, you're at this resting membrane potential of, let's say, -70. So and then you have a little bit of like sodium coming in the channel, so your membrane potential starts to slowly go up, and once it goes up and up and up, about 15 to 20 millivolts, you're gonna reach that threshold. Once you reach that threshold, it's like the voltage-gated sodium channels are gonna open, and sodium's gonna rush into the cell. Like they said earlier, you wanna go from high to low, so that's why sodium's gonna go in the cell. Therefore, it's making your cell become less negative going towards the positive direction. When that happens, that's called depolarization. And to go back to what Allie said, how that connects to this, when this starts to depolarize, at the end, at this axon terminal, it will open these voltage-gated calcium channels, but we can come back to that. So now you're at the peak of your action potential. When this happens, your sodium voltage gated channels will close just as fast as they open, so no more sodium's coming into the cell, but now your potassium voltage gated channels open. So when that happens, now you have a ton of potassium running out of the cell, again, concentration gradient, and then it's gonna cause a repolarization to happen, and it's gonna go all the way down, even past negative 70 millivolts, because the voltage gated potassium channels have not closed yet. Once they do close, then your potential will come back up to that resting membrane potential, because you're back at the beginning where you always have like a little bit of potassium flowing out of the cell. It's not a voltage gated channel, anything like that. So then going back to this, we have our action potential. Our action potential depolarizes here, causing this voltage gated calcium channel to open, which when that happens, calcium will rush into the cell. From that point, it's going to connect to these vesicles, and these vesicles hold on to neurotransmitters, which is, in this case, acetylcholine. Acetylcholine will then attach to nicotinic cholinergic receptors and release sodium into, well, in this case, we were going to do muscle.
And remember that the calcium is what's opening the vesicle, not the action potential itself. The action potential allows the voltage gated channels to open, which allow the calcium to go in, but it's the calcium that allows the vesicles to open. Again, the action potential is a trigger, it's not a direct lead into.
There's 1 minute.
Oh,
You have 1
One
minute.
minute.
we have 1 minute.
Okay. So this is a representation of what the action potential is doing. The cell receives a stimulus right here and then depolarizes with the sodium channels opening here. This is peak action potential at 30 millivolts, and then it repolarizes, slightly hyperpolarizing, and then the sodium potassium pumps equalize.
Any questions?
What's the stimulus?
For
Another action potential.
Yeah.
From the neuron.
What if it's to a muscle? Like cardiac or skeletal?
Wait, ask that again?
So like say the action potential, so you're talking about if it goes to muscle, is it going to acetylcholine or is that the stimulus for it?
I'm confused what you're asking.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, just
I'm not
like,
sure, yeah.
so stimulus is always like this, you said it was sodium?
Are you saying?
No,
Yeah, so
sodium-
what's the stimulus to cause either to the next neuron or to the muscle or whatever it's trying to?
An electrical signal from another neuron. So the dendrites of a neuron would receive an action potential, and then it would set off another neuron.
But it's from the neurotransmitter, right? To the next neuron. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Oh, okay,
So like
yes.
the neurotransmitter, whatever, I think you said it was acetylcholine.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, so that stimulates this cell,
For
and
the
that,
skeletal muscle.
that creates another action
That's what we
potential.
used for this one,
Okay,
Yeah.
in this case, because we think the next group is muscle contractions,
Mhm.
so that we tried to tie it
Does that make sense what I was asking, sorry?
I think,
The
did
stimulus.
we answer?
Yeah, I was,
Okay.
So there's the dendrite and the axon, and what was the part on the answer?
in. This part?
Yeah.
Axon
I was
terminals.
not trying to stump you guys.
No.
Oh, no, you're,
We were just trying to understand what you're asking.
So was that clear? Did that get answered?
Yeah.
Did your question get answered?
Yes, it
Do you
did.
feel like it did?
Yes.
Does everyone know what he asked and what the answer was?
What causes the original trigger
Like what's
to
the
send
stimulus?
yeah,
the
he's
action
asking
potential
what
down?
causes
Yeah.
this part of the chart to go.
The Very
What
first-
starts
What is the
this?
stimulus, not
Yeah.
whether it is a stimulus, but what is the stimulus?
Yeah.
But it wouldn't always be ACH if it's farther down the muscle. It would be
Could be like, there's
another
different
Could be.
action
neurotransmitters.
potential.
Exactly, yeah,
Like-
exactly. So
Could be.
like, these can essentially be right next to.
So once it gets past that terminal, it ends up just being a wave of action potentials.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
and just remember a dendrite too, that the action potentials, it's one at a time, but they can be split second, so this one can get an action potential, then this one, but you're not getting like 10 action potentials at the same time, all hitting at the same millisecond. It's one after another, after another, after another. So it's almost, not a constant flow, that's not.
Frequent, like the frequency of it?
Cause you're talking about the refractory period, there's like
Yeah.
a mandatory refractory.
Yeah.
Before it
versus
sends the next
absolute.
signal and it has, it's like maximum peak, so it's not the amount in which it depolarizes, it's the frequency in which the signals are sent.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions?
We all agree? We all understand?
I'm still confused on what the very first stimulus is to cause the very first action.
It could be any,
Yeah, just.
It's just any receptor, right?
yeah,
The receptor,
Depending on whatever neurotransmitter.
yeah, depending on what type
The
of
brain gets the signal. and then-
nerve.
So I click him in the forehead.
Thanks for that.
that would be,
And that's the stimulus.
The neural.
What did I do right there that initiates what happens at that
So
site?
this is
So
this
what
is
is
a motor
released in the
neuron,
flick?
and that would be a sensory neuron,
Okay.
which would set off an
Now,
action potential.
Isn't it neural?
because of pressure receptors. Because of pressure receptors, right?
Exactly. So
I thought pain was
sensory
neural
receptors that would
Or
detect
depending on
that
how
and
hard
then
you put
send
them
a
on the pain
signal,
receptor.
and
Right.
then motor would create an actual somatic reaction.
I don't know. I
Those
would
are
say, I
mechanical
thought
gates.
pain was like a neuroreceptor, but I don't remember the neurotransmitter for that receptor.
The very first sensor.
Again, we
is
went with
mechanical,
motor
so we're
because
talking like
the next
when you
group
get
Mechanical
the
too.
touch,
was.
the touch, the mechanicals actually open the gates to allow the first ions to get through to actually start that process going, and then it builds, and then after that, it's these neurotransmitters sending it.
Was it mechanical?
Well, like,
Or is it
like your pillow.
For sensory, you mean?
Yeah, like the touch, a lot of times, like this particular motion, it's a mechanical that's opening up the receptors right at the sensory, and then
You are
it's
physically
neurotransmitter.
depressing that area, transforming like on that molecular level.
Yeah.
And that's different than other receptors that would indicate like pressure or pain on
Right,
those
there's
receptors.
Meissner's corpuscles.
Remember, there's lots of different types of gates, there's chemical gates, there's voltage gates, there's mechanical gates.
Pressure, pain, light.
You just go through all the senses.
So, where is the action potential happening? Exactly, where is the action potential happening?
On the motor neuron or on this chart?
Well, your
that's
chart
the
is
goal,
related to the motor neuron, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I don't really care which one you answer.
Okay, okay.
Where anatomically, where is the action potential happening?
It would,
Where is the start of it, and where is
so
the end of
it's,
it?
it starts at the dendrite, and then it travels down the axon and ends at the axon terminal.
Do we all agree with that?
No.
Did you all agree with that statement?
No.
On your own crew?
Yeah.
The action potential, I think, ends,
I thought I kept going.
but then
Now we're skipping.
it comes into here.
Yeah, I thought
This part is connected to this, so this, I believe is through the axon here, and then it relates to this with the calcium.
So what initiates an action potential?
Another stimulus.
I want you to be very specific. What is the thing that when this happens, an action potential will fall?
The threshold?
Sodium
Okay.
Isn't it the neurotransmitter to go to the next dendrite?
Well, I haven't heard
Because
it.
isn't,
Hold on. I'm gonna ask the group one more time. What is the moment that an action potential is initiated and will follow through?
When a cell's resting membrane potential rises above the threshold.
I need more information. Yes, give me more information.
When the voltage gated sodium channels open?
Great, where?
Here.
no, on
No, I
the
think it's
picture?
there.
Anatomically, where is that site?
The axon.
In the cell, in the nucleus
Axon
of
pillar.
the head of the axon. cell membrane.
On your green to purple?
Right there, axon hill.
Yeah.
Dendrite head.
Right.
Is that what we're looking for?
Okay, so Amanda, you drawing something there? What are you drawing? Or
So,
what are you circling?
I believe it's the axon hillock.
Okay, so what is at the axon hillock? I'm
Those-
asking questions that I know I already asked, but I'm gonna keep asking them. So what's at the axon hillock?
Sodium channels,
What kind?
voltage gated.
Okay, are they up in are they in the stoma?
No,
Are they in the dendrites?
no,
So the voltage gated sodium channels
Yeah.
are where?
they're at the axon hillock.
Okay, I wanna ask my question again. Where is the action potential initiated?
At the axon hillock.
And where does it go to? Where does it end? What
The
ends
axon.
the action potential?
Axon terminal.
What is the last thing that action potential is going to affect?
The axon terminal.
I want you to be specific. What is the last thing that action potential will affect?
The calcium
As an
channels.
action potential,
The calcium channels.
the calcium channels. So now, where, please, do we start and end our action potentials?
So it would still be in the axon terminal, but as the action potential reaches the axon
That's the
terminal.
beginning or end?
At this is the end,
Great. Where's the beginning?
at the axon hillock.
Okay.
So it goes from here.
Are we all clear on that? Now, the question at hand that was originally asked is how do we get there?
How do we get a stimulus?
Yes, so at the dendrites, do excitation of dendrites initiate an action potential?
They start building charges because they start getting.
Don't answer questions that I'm not asking, answer my question. Does excitation of a dendrite initiate an action potential?
No.
They do not. What does it do?
Local depolarization.
They have the summation of to build up the voltage. They're being excited by that acetylcholine.
Okay, so what's happening at the dendrite?
They're receiving a message from the last.
Neurotransmitter.
Don't use message. I want you to be specific. What's happening at the dendrites? You should be giving me chemical names
They're
or voltages or something.
They're
Receiving a neurotransmitter.
What neurotransmitter?
Acetylcholine.
On what receptors?
Nicotinic.
And nicotinic receptors are on what? Not dendrites. What are they on?
The soma.
I should rephrase. They're on the dendrites, but they're on some. They're not on the dendrites. They're on this that is on the dendrites.
Open channel.
What kind of a channel?
Sodium channel?
Sodium channels.
Yes.
That will then what?
Create local depolarization.
That cause what when these channels open?
Depolarization.
Reaches the threshold.
Sodium enters the cell. What is sodium entering the cell going to do?
Depolarize.
Send us that wave of energy to the next.
Wave of energy.
No, it's gonna change the charge.
The
Very
charge.
good, so it enters a charge. Great. What is happening to that sodium? So, picture this, they're on the dendrite. You just had acetylcholine that affected the nicotinic receptor on that dendrite, and sodium came in. What is happening to that sodium?
It's creating a charge. It's building up.
What is happening to that sodium?
It's building up. It's getting
What
a
is
higher
happening to that
concentration.
sodium?
Becoming a higher concentration.
I still haven't heard it. What's happening to that sodium?
Something will happen.
So, you're gonna hear this from me all year long. You guys are in the habit of answering questions you wanna answer and not answering my question.
What is happening?
If Chanlin is sodium, and as sodium, he's going to grab Chad. That is what sodium is doing in this case, yes? What was my question?
What is sodium doing?
No, what is my question?
What is happening to sodium?
I didn't ask what Chanlin is doing, I asked what is happening to him. What's happening to the sodium after it enters the cell? Not what is sodium doing, what is happening to the sodium after it enters the dendrite.
It is increasing?
So he's going to multiply himself? Like a cell, he can divide?
No.
Is he pumped back out?
Continue.
So
By what?
by, what?
You're correct.
The sodium potassium pump?
That's what's happening in Chandler.
Okay.
He's coming into the dendrite, and then he's getting pumped back out. That's what's happening to Chandler. Yes?
Yeah.
Therefore, what's happening to the cell membrane as Chandler enters and is pumped out?
The gates behind him are closing.
Great. That's a great answer to a different question. My question was, what is happening to the cell membrane as Chandler comes in and then he's sent out? Say again?
It becomes positive and negative.
Great. So we're at a certain level, yes, a certain charge. We call that the resting membrane potential. Chandler comes in and does what to that membrane? Makes it more positive. Then what happens to Chandler? He gets pumped out, and what happens to the membrane? It goes back down. That's what's happening at the dendrite. Where does the action potential start? Okay, so the question that was originally at hand is, how do we get whatever happens at threshold? How does the action potential get initiated? How is threshold reached?
Because there's a lot of me coming from multiple different places all at the same time, even though some are getting pumped out in certain areas because of the sodium potassium pump, more and more is flooding that cannot be compensated by the sodium potassium pump, so we rush the door till the room cannot hold any more of me, and then I spill out into the hallway.
Do we understand the analogy he just tried to use?
There's a lot of it, it's awesome.
So that little pump keeps getting bigger and bigger until it reaches that threshold.
Okay, so one sodium ion entered at a dendrite can't initiate an action potential. We have to have multiple dendrites affected many times to introduce lots of sodium. That is constantly being pumped out, but in that given moment in time, we have to have enough sodium entry into that soma that it goes so positive into that soma that positivity, which when I say positivity, I don't mean it's positive, I mean it's more positive than it normally is, less negative, let's use that word instead. That membrane has to be less negative, to the tune of about 15 to 20 millivolts less negative, at the axon hillock, which means we have to have enough sodium entry that it counters what the sodium potassium ATPase pumps are doing to exit that stuff. Does that make sense? So that by the time we get to that trigger zone, the axon hillock, the charge of the membrane is high enough that it affects the voltage regulated channel at that moment. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then once we have that first voltage regulated channel open, one sodium ion, let me ask you a different question. The sodium ion that comes in at that trigger zone channel, that first channel, what happens to that sodium ion? We are at the axon hillock. The first channel that was affected by that voltage has opened, so we've reached threshold, and a sodium ion has come in. One sodium ion has come in so far. I'm breaking it down to one for a moment, right? What happens to that sodium ion after it enters through that channel and it is now in the axon?
Pumped out?
It would get pumped back.
What's that?
It's pumped out.
It's pumped out again. It's pumped out again. But the whole point of the axon is that one entry was enough to trigger the next voltage channel before it got pumped out. Because the voltage channels are so close together that it only took that one entry of that sodium to initiate that other voltage channel while it was getting pumped out. Which is why the axon is referred to as an all or nothing reaction. There's enough of those channels in a row that all we have to do is spring one, and if we spring that first channel, then no matter what, all of them will get sprung one after the next with sodium that comes in and is immediately getting moved out. but the sheer act of it coming in was enough for the next channel to be sprung. So here's what we have. We have sodium come in, it springs this channel, it's getting pumped out while more sodium is coming in this channel. Yes? This sodium sprung this channel, it's getting pumped out, but it already sprung that channel, so another sodium comes in. And so we have this constant action that happened off the very first voltage channel that was set. Does that make sense? Hans?
Kind of a follow-up. So, you guys may not know, because I definitely don't remember. So why do myelin sheath or the myelin cells speed up the depolarization down the axon?
The way I was told was to think of it like an insulated wire, in that a wire, if you're working construction or something, you have an insulated wire, a non-insulated wire. The insulated wire, one, is going to be safer, but two, that insulation provides protection from everything outside, which means that the signal, again, this is how I learned, I could be totally wrong, because it's protected from all the other stuff that's going around, it's a straighter shot, essentially.
Isn't it?
I don't really follow, sorry.
Yeah, see,
Isn't it?
that method worked for me, but it may not work for you guys.
So, do you understand?
Isn't it because when the,
I totally get what the myelin sheaths are doing,
Yeah.
they're insulated, but why is that speeding up
It-
depolarization down the
Because-
axon?
isn't it, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Whatever.
Isn't it because when the myelin sheath is there, then there's no pumps to pump it out, and so that sodium that comes in gets trapped there, and so that signal shoots down faster because the sodium can't be pumped out.